was dead, my spirit cold. I had no joy, far from the fold. Messiah came, he made me sing. Oh, he put laughter into my soul. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Messiah's come, and he brought joy. Oh, he brought laughter into my soul. Long ago they promised he'd bring us light. Long ago they promised he'd bring us light. A light to lighten oh, wandering feet. But he brought laughter into my soul. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Messiah's come, and he brought joy. Oh, he brought laughter into my soul. It would have been enough had he brought light. It would have been enough had he brought peace. It would have been enough had he brought love. But he brought laughter into my soul. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Messiah's come, and he brought joy. Oh, he brought laughter into my soul. I always wanted to change key in the end there. How many of you think this sounds okay? It's a small group. We just have a show of hands. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Does that sound like okay? You like that? Okay.
It's always that.
Let's do it. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Oh, come, let's sing, let us rejoice. Messiah's come, and he brought joy. Oh, he's brought laughter into my soul. I just wanted to
I like that.
one little lift at the end there, but you know, if I have other musicians have to tell them, key change, and they're going to, the violin and the flute and the, I'm going to it's okay. Maybe I'll try that in the next one. It'll just be a shock to everyone. Melech Hosea, Mashiach again. Melech Hosea, Mashiach again. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. King, Redeemer, Savior, and Shield. King, Redeemer, Savior, and Shield. Blessed art thou, blessed art thou, Shield of Abraham. Blessed art thou, Shield of Abraham. You are the mighty one forever, O Lord. You are the mighty one forever, O Lord. 'Cause you raise the dead, sleeping in the graves. You are mighty to save. You raise the dead, sleeping in the graves. You are mighty to save. Hosea, Mashiach again. Hosea, Mashiach again. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Stuart Donovan told me he wanted me to come to his church and play music for him. Were you there? No? I thought that was, wow, really?
Yeah.
Where is it? LA? Chicago? It's like a big city or something.
Oh boy.
I went, I don't know. I'd have to get a toothbrush and everything. Think about it. Okay. Maybe it never happened. Maybe I was just thinking that it never happened. I was just like thinking about him. All right, so. I will enter his gates Lord is all around his people. We take our cues sometimes from just the geography. It's more than that. Of course, we know that it's more than that. But sometimes it's good to just look around us and realize how we're protected, how we are protected. Sometimes we rely on our own understanding and our own abilities, but it's God. It's God who protects us. So that's what this is about.
You're up front, we're following you.
I got a stall for my kid. Okay, he's expecting the quarter up thing. I don't know what he's
like the rabbi's light. Right, we have some announcements. We are coming right up on our Hebrew blast-off. Well, actually, we have a couple weeks yet. That's February 23rd and 24th. There's information on that here. It's going to be a great time for people who want to grow their brains. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have actually fewer sheets of paper than usual. We're condensing. We're putting several announcements on one. I see what you're up to. So Havdalah game night is the 23rd. So if you're coming to Hebrew Blast-Off, just stay and we'll play some games. That's at 7 o'clock. By now, most of us have gotten the instructions on the door. Make sure it's closed behind you. If it's not closed when you walk out, then walk back in and follow these instructions for the safety of all of us. We have a big work day coming up. That's on February 17th. We want to do that before it gets so hot. We are right now in the magical time of living in Florida, and so this is time to enjoy. We have some work to do upstairs. We have some work to do outside. Whatever kind of work you like to do, we've got it. Oh, you don't like to do work? Oh. All right. Most of the rest of the announcements are on the normal things, so I'll let you take advantage of those. And that's good. We have a short night for announcements tonight. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for coming.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
I went through all the trouble putting it all away.
Just so you can put it back on again. Okay, as we begin our service this evening, please turn to pages 14 to 25 for Lakado D, our traditional way of welcoming Shabbat as we've done so down through the ages, through the centuries. Not that we've been around for centuries.
Even if we feel like it.
Some of us may have been. All right, as we face the door to literally welcome Shabbat because of the privilege we have of greeting this great queen, so to speak, we respond with the words that are found on those pages as we anticipate the promises of God related to not only Shabbat, but also the Shabbat to come, in the world to come. Pages 14 to 25. Jacob leads, we respond.
Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi likrat kala panei Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi likrat kala Shemo echad leshem el tiferet v'nitila lecha dodi likrat kala panei Shabbat nikavela lecha dodi likrat kala Shabbat lechu מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נשאוך, סוף מעשה המחשבה תחילה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקרא. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקרא. התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי. אורי, אורי, שיר די בארי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקרא. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקרא. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Observe and remember in a single statement the unique God caused us to hear his command. He alone is Lord, and his name is unique to his fame and splendor and praise together. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Let's go to meet the Sabbath, for she is the source of blessing from the beginning, anointed from ancient days, though made last, conceived first. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Wake up, your light has come. Arise, shine, awake, awake. Sing a grand song, the glory of God is revealed to you. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath.
You may be seated, but take a couple deep breaths and look forward, and you will see that we don't have candles. Please, Sharon, if you would. And the reason for that is our regular candle caretaker, Virginia, had car problems. So she's still on the way. So now the candles are also on the way because Sharon is now going to get them. So while we're waiting for them, let me just share a couple reflections. Like that? Reflections? Thank you. You will get into in a minute. Wake up, your light has come is what we just sang. And it's a reminder that truly, although this is speaking prophetically, the light has in fact come. And the light is the one who guarantees for us the benefits of Shabbat. And please remember that when we do get to light these candles, when they arrive in a few minutes, it's a reminder that God has entered into a permanent relationship with us. We are his people. He is our God forever. When we sing Veshamru, we're reminded of that. The children of Israel will keep the Shabbat throughout their generations, for it's an everlasting covenant.
I'm sorry,
Keep it
Rabbi,
forever.
not where I'm used to finding them, and they're on the shelf.
They're not out there on the shelf.
Janet, do you know where they are?
Could they be somewhere in the kitchen?
Can they?
Do you want to try a song or two while we await the search?
Musical number. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider thrown into the sea. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider thrown into the sea. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, and now he is my victory. strength, my song, and now he is my victory. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him. I will sing unto the Lord, for he is triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider thrown into the sea. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider thrown into the sea. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, and now he is my victory. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, and now he is my victory. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him.
And now there are at least 3 of you, besides Virginia, who knows where these candles are. Will one of you be kind enough?
They were in the kitchen to the left of the main sink, in that cabinet.
Okay.
Now everyone knows the secret.
So, if next time you come and the candles are missing, please feel free.
I didn't notice they were missing, and I've been sitting right here looking at it.
All right, now we're ready to finalize the welcome of Shabbat as we light the Shabbat lights.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'adlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and has commanded us to light the candles for Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehayot or legoyim, v'netan lanu Yeshua Meshachenu ha'or la'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and has commanded us to be a light to the nations and has given us Yeshua, our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As we respond with our Tehillat Habrit Kadashah portion this evening, pages 136 and 137 at the bottom of those pages. As we respond there, let me remind you that in a sense, as we respond here, we are saying that the anticipation of Lecha Dodi, the prayers of the Amidah, for example, the first paragraph, we ask God that he would bring a redeemer in love for his people. We say, in effect, those prayers have been answered. And so we respond with our gratitude. Pages 136 and 137. I'll lead you through those opening couple lines in Hebrew, and then ask that you respond with me with the entirety of the English. Baruch Adonai Elohei Yisrael, ki pekadat amo vayishlach lo padut vayarem lanu keren Yeshua b'veit David avdo. Together.
Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come and has redeemed his people. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies, and to enable us to serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days.
Guaranteeing those benefits and guaranteeing our destiny permanently as well. Ha-Elohim Asher on pages 40 and 41 reminds us that he is the one who sits on the throne. Again, we follow along as Jacob leads, and we join him.
Elohim asher diber מקדם פעמים רבות ובדרכים רבות אל האבות ויד הלוויים דיבר עלינו באחרית הימים האלה ביד הבין אשר שם ליורש כל ולידו גם עשה את העולמים וזוהר כבודו בצלם עצמותו ונושא כל דברו רב הגבורה ולך שעשה טיהור חטאים ישב לימין In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, He has spoken to us by Messiah, His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, and through whom He made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory and the flawless manifestation of His reality. He sustains all things by His powerful word. After He made atonement for sins, He sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
If that is truly our response and our attitude, then the words of our Amidah portions for this evening, pages 60 to 63, will certainly be reflective of how we approach Him. We're doing the abridged and summary sections tonight, and you'll notice it begins, "Grant us, Lord, the knowledge of your ways. Direct our hearts." Literally, circumcise our hearts to your worship and to your service. That becomes our response as we now stand, facing Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, utilizing these words and the words of the summary to reflect our gratitude and our commitment to our God as we pray that we will get to see the lengthening of the light of the Messiah, the one who sits on the throne and who awaits that time as well. Pages 60 to 63 becomes our prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, El Hagadol Hagabor V'Hanorah, El Elyon K'nei Shemayim Ba'aretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, God of our ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are the God of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. You are the great, the mighty. You are the revered God, the Most High God, who is master of heaven and of earth.
Magin Avon במאמרו, האל הקדוש שאין כמוהו, המניח לעמו. ביום שבת קדשו, כי בעם רצה להניח להם, לפניו נעבוד בעירה ואף אחד ונודה לשמו בכל יום. תמיד מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי ומניח בי קדושה. לעמדו שני גודי זכר למעשה בראשית. זכר למעשה He, with his word, was a shield to our forefathers, and by his voice will raise the dead. The Holy God, like whom there is none, who gives rest to his people on his holy Sabbath day, because he delights in them to grant them rest. Before his presence we will serve with fear and awe. Daily and constantly we will thank him with the appropriate praises. He is the God to whom thanksgiving is due, the Lord of peace, who hallows the Sabbath and blesses the seventh day, and in holiness gives rest to a people filled with delight in remembrance of the creation.
Our God and God of our ancestors, accept our rest. Hallow us by your commandments. Grant our portion in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness. Gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you truthfully. And in your love and favor, O Lord our God, let us inherit your holy Sabbath. And may Israel, who sanctify your name, rest thereon. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord. You are the one who makes Shabbat special. You may be seated. As we understand all that God has done for us, it's appropriate for us to respond in gratitude and in praise. Hence, we respond with Half Kaddish, pages 4 to 7.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash me'raba. Ve'amad yivrak chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'vyom echon u'chay kidechol b'yet Yisrael b'galau v'zman kariv v'imaru Amen. Yahesh me'raba me'vorah le'olam u'lol ve'od v'ayah yitbarach. Yitbarach ve'yisavach v'yitba'af v'yitkwamam v'yitnaseh v'yithada v'yithaleh v'yithalav shemedet kudesha b'richu la'ela la'ela min kol birchata v'sirata tushbechata v'nechemata v'aviran be'alma v'imahu Amen. Let his name be glorified and sanctified throughout the universe which he created according to his purpose. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom in your lifetime, in your days, and in the lifetime of all the house of Israel. speedily, soon, and let all say,
Amen.
Let his great name be praised forever and ever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, magnified and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he, although he is far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world, and say,
Amen.
Building on that last couple phrases, or lines rather, he's far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which can be offered in the world, which is why our normal response is as it is now, pages 44 and 45, midway down. If that's the case, as we praise our exalted God, then who is like him throughout the entirety of the universe? So that will become our response as you join in those pages. It begins, praise our exalted God. Blessed is he who is to be blessed. Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to you with great joy. By the way, it was a song that Gary and Jacob let us sing, the song at the sea. And as they all said, and we all sang, so now we all say, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders?
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tahilot osef elei. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tahilot osef elei.
And now we answer that question as we stand before the great King, the one like whom there is none, as we are to remind ourselves, Ta lifnei mi ata omed, know before whom it is you stand. We respond that we do know that. Pages 88 and 89. Truly there is none like you, O Lord among the gods.
In chamocha ba'elim Adonai, in chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tahilot osef elei, osef elei. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai malach le'olam va'ed. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
He reigns, and he needs to continue to reign in our lives. That's the acknowledgement we now respond with on pages 34 to 39 as we turn towards Jerusalem again, the direction of the ark. And we acknowledge that he is our God. And I don't see that Matt has returned. Jenny, would you be kind enough to assist with the scroll? We now respond on pages 34 to 39.
Sure.
Well,
Oh, Matt is here, okay.
he is here, yeah.
Okay. In just a second. All right.
Perfect time. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto, Legolam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, כל אשריך וכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושנתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך, ובביתך בדרך, ובשכבך ובקומך, ושבתם לאוכל ידך, והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
That which we've just affirmed will be the reality in times to come, when, as Vahi Ben So reminds us on pages 88 and 89, the Torah will go forth from Jerusalem, the word of the Lord from Mount Zion. Just as it goes forth among us now, so it will throughout the entirety of the world. Our anticipation, our confidence, and our commitment is found in those words.
ויהי בנשוא הארון, ויאמר משה, קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך, וגנוזו משנאיך מפניך. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני בירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
Having given to us a tremendous treasure, we have the opportunity to respond. That response is found for us on page 133.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah,
Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
Mi shebarach avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, veYaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Matt. May he bless John. May he bless Jenny. May he bless Janice, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless
the Lord who is blessed forever and ever. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
V'daber Adonai el Moshe le'mor, Diber al b'nei Yisrael v'yichuli Terumah et kol isha asher yidavenu libo tichu et terumati v'zot ha-terumah asher tichu mi'item. You may be seated. And so the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel," and this is what they're to do. "You are to take up for me," usually translated an offering, it's an elevation offering. And it goes on to say, "From everyone who gives from his or her heart, you are to take my offering or portion. And this is the offering or the portion which you will take from each of them." Very interesting text with all kinds of implications. But the main one that we need to take away from it at this point is, if we're going to bring anything, it has to come from our hearts. And the text goes on to describe how the people did exactly that. And pretty soon God had to say, "Stop, you've given more than enough." More on the text, but not right now. Just a reminder, we give, or should give, from our hearts, and wholeheartedly.
I'll be reading from Exodus 25, verses 8 and 9, and then 17 through 22. "They are to make me a sanctuary so that I may live among them. You are to make it according to everything I show you, the design of the tabernacle and the design of its furnishings. This is how you are to make it. You are to make a cover for the ark out of pure gold. You are to make 2 cherubim of gold. Make them of hammered work for the 2 ends of the ark cover. The cherubim will have their wings spread out above, so that their wings cover the ark, and their faces are toward each other and toward the ark cover. You are to put the ark cover on top of the ark. There I will meet with you. I will speak with you from above the ark cover."
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed
are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
The text began, Vadaber Adonai el Moshe Lamor. Speak to the children of Israel. Speak to them. As the descendants of those very children of Israel and others who have joined with us, we stand in their footsteps, so to speak, in their very sandals, as we acknowledge that these are the words that come directly from God. The Zot HaTorah is that acknowledgement, and we do, in fact, stand as we make that acknowledgement. These are the words delivered directly to us through the hand of Moses. Pages 98 and 99 is the text. If you need the transliteration, you'll find that on page 95.
Zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Adi Adonai Veyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated.
I'm reading from Exodus 29, 42 through 46. Through all your generations, this is to be the regular burnt offering at the entrance to the tent of meeting before Adonai. There is where I will meet with you to speak with you. There I will meet with the people of Israel, and the place will be consecrated by my glory. I will consecrate the tent of meeting and the altar. Likewise, I will consecrate Aaron and his sons to serve me in the office of Kohen. Then I will live with the people of Israel and be their God. They will know that I am Adonai their God, who brought them out of the land of Egypt in order to live with them. I am Adonai their God.
Words that change lives. Words that should change our lives, which is what we acknowledge now as we respond with Etz Chaim. It's a tree of life, waiting to take root in our lives. As we say, renew our days as of old. Pages 96 and 97.
Etz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba v'tokei ha'meusha derachei ha'dar enoam v'chol ativotei ha'shalom. Ashirenu Adonai elecha ve'nashuva Kadesh Amenu Kadesh Yamenu Kekedem. Hashirenu Adonai elecha ve'nashuva Kadesh Yamenu Kadesh Yamenu Kekedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
Our response continues on pages 98 and 99 with Uvnu Ko Yomar, as we stand once again, now in effect standing as his priest before him, acknowledging him as well as expressing our gratitude. Pages 98 and 99.
Uvnu Chol Yomar Shuba Adonai Rivavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avor David abdecha al teshev penei mishikecha. Ki lechach tov natati lachem. Torati al ta'azovu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
And now as we greet one another up here, you get to greet one another down there. Don't wander all the way around the synagogue to do this, because it's not time for the wilderness wanderings yet.
This isn't all. I knew they were going in there to see it. That's
Great. I love that shirt.
Okay, sit down.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, hey, you gave us a good effort.
Life, as many people say, is full of mysteries. There's the mystery of life itself. There's the mystery of the origin of the universe. And then there are all those amazing mysteries of history and of science that fill so much of the programming on the Discovery Channel and on the History Channel. And I almost said on the Disney Channel as well. And of course, there is the mystery of the murder on the Orient Express. And a further mystery, why did they ever remake that movie yet again? As well as those delicious, intricate mysteries solved by Sherlock Holmes and by Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo's the best.
However, there is a mystery unfolding before our very eyes as we read the Parashiyot running through the next several weeks. Now, when you look back to the beginning of Shemot or Exodus, you will find that the book has unveiled some truly amazing events. We've got the Exodus and the plagues. We've got the Red Sea. We've got the experience on Mount Sinai. And appropriately, it feels like we've been rushed through some rather astounding stuff. And guess what? We have been. But beginning with tonight's Parsha, it's as if the brakes have suddenly been slammed on. For 16 whole chapters, almost one half of the book of Exodus, almost 16 whole chapters are devoted to the almost excruciating details of the tabernacle. Which raises the question, so what's the big deal about the tabernacle, the Mishkan as it's known in Hebrew, that it takes up so many chapters? Or if you want to put it this way, what's the mystery of the Mishkan? Well, God did say quite emphatically in the text that was read for you tonight, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. So what is the real purpose of this sanctuary, the tabernacle, the Mishkan, that which was the forerunner of the temple? And what is its significance to the Jewish people, to us, and to those who joined with us? Now let me suggest that this is a crucial question, especially when we note that the last 5 Torah portions in Exodus, they all deal with the precise plans for the sanctuary in the desert, situated as it was in the very center of the tribes. Centuries ago, one of my favorite rabbis, Nachmanides, the Ramban, about the 13th century, notes that the commandment to build the Mishkan directly follows the revelation at Sinai. So he maintains that the Mishkan's function then, hear him carefully, was to be a center from which God would continue to direct the Israelites. And guess what? When you get to the end of the book of Exodus, that's exactly what happens. Exodus 40, the closing paragraph. God moves into the Mishkan, and then in the very next verses say, and God led the people through the wilderness, and God spoke directly to the people through Moses. Therefore, the very first aspect of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which the Bible describes, notably, is the ark. As the text says, the second text that was read to you this evening, chapter 25, the end, and I will meet with you there, and I will speak to you from above the ark cover, from between the two cherubs, or cherubim, which is on the top of the ark of the covenant. Quick reflection here. If you picture this image, then you will see very quickly that you've got a rather dramatic reversal of Genesis 3:24, because there the cherubim did what? They blocked entrance back into the garden. Here they welcome entrance into the very presence of God. Anyhow, Moses reiterates this notion of an ongoing revelation when he reviews the grand event at Sinai in his own final speech. As he says in Deuteronomy 5, God spoke these words to you from the mountain, in the middle of the fire, the cloud, and the fog. A great voice, listen carefully, a great voice which never stops. So the place where the revelation continued was originally the ark of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. One very important aspect. However, there are some traditions among us, in our heritage as Jewish people, there are some traditions which see the tabernacle, or see in the tabernacle another purpose altogether. In other words, they see it as the building of a home in which God and Israel will live. A building in which God and Israel will live. Therefore, the revelation at Sinai symbolized from this understanding the wedding between God and Israel, with the marriage contract being the tablets, the biblical covenant. The commandment to erect a sanctuary then really instructs us to build a bridal home in which the almighty bridegroom would unite with his bride Israel. And he says as much in Isaiah 54 and verse 5. He says, your maker is your husband. And in the text, it's one of the critical texts often called the New Covenant text, but as we discovered in class over the last couple of weeks, if you weren't there, you didn't make that discovery. But if you were there, you'll remember that this covenant, often called the New Covenant, is actually the renewed covenant. But anyhow, in that renewed covenant text, he describes Israel as his bride, or as his wife as well. So, given that as a background, then the accessories of the Mishkan can be seen as the usual furnishings of a home. At this point, you should be saying, but where did this interpretation come from? How did they ever come up with this particular idea? Well, there is the text in Exodus 19, verse 17 from a couple weeks ago, which says, and they stood, listen to this, stood under the mountain. Okay, that's rather interesting. So some rabbinic authorities suggest that God turned Mount Sinai upside down and transformed it into a chuppah, a wedding canopy. Others, well, they view the cloud cover as it led the people through the wilderness as the chuppah. And then we have the text that we read last week, Exodus 24, verses 8 to 11. And that text is, or describes the typical covenant-confirming meal of the ancient Near East. In this case, it was confirming the covenant God gave through Moses. As it turns out, it's rather similar to, or rather parallel to similar meals which confirm either a betrothal, an engagement, and with it the ketubah that comes along with it, as found or as was practiced in Second Temple times. And then let me suggest there are hints in our text tonight as well, laying this kind of foundation. The text began, Vayechu li. Literally, it says, you are to take for me. You are to take for me. That, my friends, is common marriage or wedding phraseology or terminology, certainly by the time of the Second Temple period. In a marriage ceremony and even a betrothal ceremony, the bride and the groom say to one another, I take you. So hidden within this very text, you are to take for me. And then you'll notice that it's libo. It's to come from your heart, which is how all these kinds of exchanges of vows are to take place. And then it's called terumah. You heard me translate that a couple different ways as I was translating the text earlier. An offering, yes, but as the rabbi, the great rabbi from the 11th century, Rashi, reminded us, it can be understood as portion, and he suggested it's something that was specially set aside for God. But the term, because of what it comes from in the Hebrew, also means, as I indicated, raise up or elevate. Which, by the way, is exactly what God does for us by bringing us into marriage or into the marriage relationship with himself as the King of the universe. And please remember, in that context, in the text that we read, he's described as literally sitting enthroned among or between the cherubim. And that should remind you of a text that is part of the Amidah. Actually, it's part of Isaiah. It's done as part of the Amidah, paragraph 3, which talks about the fact of Isaiah finding himself in that throne room scene. And what did he find? He found God surrounded by the cherubim. Same picture, same imagery. The sages of the Talmud express this idea very clearly as you take a look at it. And I quote now. Rabbi Katina said, whenever Israel came up to the festival to Jerusalem, listen to this, the curtain would be removed for them between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And the cherubim were shown to them, there they are again, whose bodies were intertwined with one another, embracing. And the people would be thus addressed, look, you are beloved before God as the love between man and woman. Given this perspective, then, the cherubim then represent God and the Jewish nation. And from that perspective, then, you move from chapter 24 into chapter 25. And so you move, quite literally in this case as well, from the marriage meal, the ratifying ceremony meal, to the Mishkan, the honeymoon home, so to speak. And then its portion, remember, Terumah. Its portion implies then that it's their portion as well as God's portion. It's a shared portion. And it is, in other words, not just his home, but it's a home that is theirs as well. So those are just some of the indicators. But there are other indicators which the rabbis discovered scattered throughout the biblical text that reinforce this perspective, namely indicators of our marriage relationship with God. For example, there are the clear, wise principles which every married couple eventually learns. Among them, for every action, there is an equal and opposite criticism. Or, no one is listening until you make a mistake. By the way, were you listening when I read the text? This is a commercial. Did I make any mistakes? You could have checked because it's in the bulletin. And you will be able to check in future weeks because it's in the bulletin every week, but only if you take the Hebrew blast off. Okay, back to what I was talking about. Wise principles which every married couple eventually learns. Another one, it would be, 2 wrongs are only the beginning. And one final one I'll share with you. The problem with the gene pool is that there is no lifeguard. Actually, there are better examples and indicators of our marriage relationship in the scriptures, according to the rabbi's understanding. For example, God's covenant bonding to his chosen one. In it, God himself describes it in the following way. This is from Ezekiel 16. He says, I passed by and saw that you were old enough for love. So I gave you my solemn oath, and I entered into a covenant with you. A a covenant with you, and you became mine. In other words, I took you. Therefore, the Mosaic covenant is quite clearly a marriage contract, or what we call a ketubah. And so the rabbis regarded the Jewish wedding service then as reflecting the main features of God's bonding with Israel at Mount Sinai. In other words, the Jewish covenant ceremony of marriage was seen as a replica or a reenactment of what happened at Sinai. And it was designed then to be a reminder of that very basic compassion, commitment, and covenant connection which binds God in love to his people. Therefore, the ketubah is the marriage contract. It is, in fact, a document detailing the expectations and terms of the union, and it's read to the bride before she is asked to make her final commitment to the bridegroom. And so the rabbis point out that this act is pictured in the scriptures by the people standing before God at Sinai. And the text goes on to describe it in this way then. Exodus 19. So Moses went back and summoned the people and set before them all the words that the Lord had commanded him to speak. In other words, the ketubah, the marriage contract. And the people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." In other words, what had they just said? They had just said, "I do." Just that simple. Just as the ketubah stipulated the fundamental expectations and conditions for the marriage, so the joining or the uniting on Sinai with its Mosaic covenant or ketubah detailed God's expectations for and from us in a contract, in a ketubah, in a covenant formula. Furthermore, in the Jewish wedding service, the bridegroom arrives first to the chuppah, the canopy, which is where the couple stands throughout the ceremony. And he waits there for the arrival of the bride. The rabbis indicate that the divine parallel to this action occurred when, as they quote from Deuteronomy 33:2, when the Lord arrived from Sinai and dawned over them, so he came to them. In other words, they're saying God arrived as the bridegroom. God arrived as the bridegroom on Sinai. So in the divine covenant formulas of the Older Testament, it's quite clear that God initiates and Israel responds. And as Israel responds, it's as if Israel says, "I will. I will." He arrives, and Israel joins. Now, in the ancient world, people carrying torches or candles usually escorted wedding processions. This practice, in fact, is attested to as early as the 14th century before the Common Era. Into another story. There are some who believe that the materials derived from Moses, and therefore the Exodus took place sometime in the, what would you call that, since you're doing backwards? The late 1400s? You know, what you would call the lesser numbers? Mm-hmm. Think about that. Here's some Jewish math for you. We do this every now and then in class. Usually you would think that what is earlier is the lower numbers and what is later is the larger numbers, but since you're going backwards in time, you're also going backwards in math, you never mind. But anyhow, the point here is this.
It's like negative.
This material goes back to that time period, and it reinforces the understanding that the Mosaic material goes back to that time period. Well, anyhow, a practice attested to the torches or candles usually escorting wedding processions. Now, again, the rabbis point to a parallel from the ancient covenant ceremony on Sinai. The scripture says there that the people of Israel, Exodus 20, verse 18, saw thunder, lightning, and smoke. Now, strikingly, in this passage, the Hebrew term for lightning, lapidim, is the same word that's often rendered torches. In other words, this was a torchlight wedding procession. Therefore, it's likely that you have this same imagery of light that's behind the description of Yeshua as the bridegroom, coming to take his bride, as John 14:3 reminds us. Yeshua says, if I go, I will return, and will do what? Take you for myself. That is wedding terminology. And then elsewhere he says, for as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the arrival of the Son of Man. The torches, the lightning, yet again. So, as we can see, Jewish tradition teaches in a striking way that the joining of a man and woman in marriage is truly a reenactment or replica of God's eternal covenant relationship to his people. And it tells us something then of the nature of just what that relationship is, what our relationship is to our God. So to understand Jewish marriage is to understand the biblical concept of covenant. And the reverse is also true. And this is one of the reasons that in Sephardi and North African tradition, at Shavuot, you have a reenactment of the wedding scene, or a renewal of the vows, which is the way in which we celebrate Shavuot here. Finally, the Sinai covenant of marriage is a permanent covenant. It's eternal. It's regardless of the circumstances. Therefore, God said to Israel, I'm quoting Hosea 2:19. Wait a second, before I quote Hosea 2:19, let's get into this story properly. There are two things that are going on here. First of all, as Jews traditionally down through the ages, when we have laid tefillin or wrapped tefillin, before we do that, we meditate on this text, Hosea 2:19. It's a reminder of the ongoing connection of us to our God. But here's the second thing that's perhaps even more significant. Hosea was written to the northern kingdom of Israel, the kingdom that never had a godly king or a godly ruler, nor did it ever follow in a godly way. And it's to them that God says, now that you've got the background, I will betroth you to me forever. Remember the context. And God also says that he engraves Israel on the palms of his hands. Class from last night, we looked at that verse last night as well. See, you really need to come to class to get the background of some of this stuff. Okay, God says he will engrave Israel on the palms of his hands. Also, he pledges that his covenant loyalty, another text from last night, his covenant loyalty will be as constant as the shining of the sun, the moon, and the stars. In other words, if you saw a sun today, I don't mean as opposed to a daughter, if you saw the moon or the stars tonight, then you can rest assured that his loyalty is still intact. The covenant is still there and in place. The covenant he gave to us through Moses. Again, the texts are telling us this is regardless of the circumstances. Remember Veshamru in Exodus 31, 13 and following? A sign forever. The children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath in that way. This covenant, therefore, was inviolable and irrevocable. Oh, and some other rabbi came along and remarked on that understanding as well in Romans 11:29. He says the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. If you like it better this way, they're also irrevocable. So pick one. But there are some striking further insights into this marriage relationship, which are found in the rather unusual sequencing of several parashiot still ahead of us. So I'm going to prepare you for that. At the start of tonight's text, the Terumah, God says to Moses, and let them make me a sanctuary so that I may live among them. And then for the rest of tonight's portion, as well as the one for next week, the Torah describes this sanctuary, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and its contents, leaving virtually nothing to the imagination. And then beginning in Exodus 30 comes the interruption, the portion known as Kitisa, with its sin of the golden calf, only to be followed beginning in Exodus 35 with the portions Vayekhel and Pekudah, which represent, interestingly enough, a return to the myriad details of the Mishkan. In fact, they form a virtual repetition. And if there is any difference at all between the parts, it's that the first time around, the Israelites are given the command, and the second time, the Torah records that the command was in fact carried out. Which raises that question, but why does the Torah choose not to deal with that whole event in a single all-inclusive verse? For example, something like this. And the Israelites built the sanctuary exactly as God had commanded. It would have saved us 5 or 6 chapters. Well, in order to understand the significance of this almost tedious and exacting repetition, it's important to remember that God desires an intimate relationship between himself and his bride, the people of Israel, and those who join with us. So, we're commanded to build a sanctuary, the Mishkan, in order that God and Israel might have a common family home. But worshiping other gods is a betrayal of the ideas or the ideals given at Sinai. And if that revelation is in fact a marriage between God and Israel, and the 2 stone tablets are then the ketubah, the marriage contract, then in effect the Israelites commit adultery with their worship of the golden calf. They are unfaithful to their groom. Now, were God only a God of justice? If God were only a God of justice, this would then be the end of the Jewish people, the sin resulting in divorce. But since God is also a God of covenant, a God of compassion, he forgives. Before the second set of tablets came down, Exodus 34, 6 and 7, God reminded us that he is overflowing in graciousness, abounding in loving kindness. We run out of Hebrew terms and phrases to describe him, forgiving sins for 1,000 generations. However, can we legitimately expect forgiveness for as heinous a sin as idolatry? In fact, it's one of the 3 cardinal sins. Of the 613, you can get away with 610, so to speak. But 3, you must follow even if it costs you your life, and this is one of them. Here is the true significance then of the repetitions of each and every painstaking instruction regarding the Mishkan. God plans his bridal home with Israel before they sin, and then he accepts their construction of that very home even after they have sinned. Reflect on that for a second. He plans before they sin, and then accepts the construction even after they sin. Therefore, the repetition then becomes a confirmation that the intimacy between God and his bride, Israel, has been restored. And so great is the divine capacity then to forgive, much greater than that of humans, that he's able to start again from the beginning despite Israel's breach of trust. And so at that time when Moses discovered what God said in Exodus 34, 6 and 7, 2 verses later, he responds, now let my Lord walk among us. After the golden calf. Think about that. And then this becomes a model for God's enduring mercy for the whole of his relationship with Israel and through the whole of history with his bride. And it's a pattern for how he deals with us. So God made provisions for their living together in a house, a honeymoon home, the Mishkan. And then there immediately follows a honeymoon in the desert. Jeremiah 2, verse 2. You followed me as a young bride through the wilderness. And when he took up residence in that home, Exodus 40, verse 36, he personally led them. And it says, and so it was through all the travels of Israel. And God told his bride, Jeremiah 31, 3, I love you with an everlasting love. And so with loving kindness, I continually draw you. So, we, the bride, should respond as we did, at least verbally. Lord, I will love you with all my heart, with all my life, with all my strength. And that means that these guidelines of yours I will put on my heart, as well as teach them to my children. Oh, and by the way, the one who's also called the bridegroom said, if you love me, John 14, 21 and 23, you'll keep my guidelines. Yeah, that was the wedding of the centuries, and it resulted in a honeymoon house. Are you comfortable living in that home? The guidelines are there. Take the next minute or so for a time of reflection and response in quiet, please. As we understand it, the honeymoon experience with God as they walked together through the wilderness for our ancestors lasted 40 years. For us, we're not through yet, but the Elaine anticipates the time when that journey too will end, and we anticipate it as well as we now rise and join in pages 102 to 107. It's the time when God will perfect, or the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. And God will bring about the kingdom of David's greatest son, which is what we anticipate, and which becomes our encouragement, or encouragement for us. Pages 102 to 107.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לעתיד גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגוי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שמכלכנו כהם, וגורלנו ככלל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נותן שמיים ויוצא לארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו וגבי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אינו עבד מלכנו, אפס סולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשב אותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs. Our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like Him. For He stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech of kol haaretz. Vayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad. U'shemo echad.
You may be seated, except for Gary.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I was supposed to learn a new song, and I didn't learn it. The rabbi wouldn't have to come up at the end. I could sing that song at the end. I don't know. Should I just wing it? No, I gotta learn it. I need to get together with you, John, so I can figure that out. So, how's everybody doing? You doing okay? Had a good week? I'm glad to see everyone here. All right, do we have any visitors? Anyone new to us? You just stand and let us know where you are, where you're from. Everyone's familiar? Okay. All right, let's start with prayer requests and go to praise reports. Any prayer requests? John, please.